we heard opening remarks from the trial judge in this case, and that's Tony Hunt. And he told the 12 jurors he was putting the accused man, who is 33-year-old Jozef Puska of Lynally Grove in Mucklagh and Offaly, in their charge. And he says that means essentially that they'll be trying him and returning their verdicts. Now, Ashling Murphy, as you know, was killed in January 2022 along the Grand Canal in Tullamore. And Judge Tony Hunt asked the jurors who will be trying this case to approach it with an open mind. And he said they were not there as researchers or detectives, but as the judges of the facts. He said the accused man, Jozef Puska, has the presumption of innocence, that it's up to the prosecution to prove its case. And he said the accused man does not have to give evidence. And he said there is a standard of proof that has to be reached in this case.
The jurors then heard opening remarks from the prosecution barrister.
Yeah, and this was quite lengthy, quite detailed, and also upsetting at times. I'd say it was about 45 minutes to an hour, and this trial is taking place in Court 13 in the Central Criminal Court. So the prosecuting barrister in this case is an Anne Marie Lawlor. So she outlined a roadmap of the case, and she said she was doing this so the jurors wouldn't just be hearing witness after witness, that they would have an idea of the broad strands of the case. So she said Ashling Murphy was 23 years old when she died, and she was a primary school teacher from Cully. She said she'd gone out for some exercise in Tullamore after work. She worked in Durrow as a primary school teacher. And she said she was stabbed 11 times in the right of her neck at 3:30 in the afternoon along the Grand Canal. Now, she said it'd be alleged that two people came on the scene. They saw Ashling's legs kicking and the emergency services were rang. Now, they tried to revive her, but she was pronounced dead at the scene. The jurors were told they would hear extensive post-mortem evidence that Ashling Murphy had 12 injuries, and 11 of those injuries were stab wounds. The prosecuting barrister also said that she realised this case had received a lot of attention. Everyone was aware that this was a violent death, and there would be great sympathy for Ashling Murphy and those she left behind, and a visceral revulsion for what happened. But the prosecuting barrister addressed the jurors, and she said, you have to address this case in a cold, clinical and dispassionate way, and not from a position of sympathy. And she said she knew this was a lot to ask of a jury. And the jurors were also told that Jozef Puska and Ashling Murphy did not know each other at all, either directly or indirectly.
What did we hear about the accused man, Jozef Puska?
Well, we heard that he's 33 years old. He's from Slovakia, and he has an interpreter in this case. He's been living in Ireland since 2012 and lives in Mucklagh, which, as I'm sure your listeners are well aware, it's just outside Tullamore. Now, the prosecuting barrister, Anne Marie Lawlor, said there would be considerable evidence about how the accused was allegedly involved. She spoke about the day that Ashling Murphy was killed, the 12th of January 2022, and she said the accused man was seen on CCTV footage in and around Tullamore that day. She described it as meandering aimlessly. She said they were going to see CCTV footage of two women, that he was close to these two women. It was in separate incidents. One was blissfully unaware of him and he did a U-turn, but the second woman would say he was staring at her, moving slowly behind her, and the jury was told this woman will describe how she felt about those movements. The jurors were also told it's accepted his distinctive bike was found at the scene, and it will be alleged DNA was found under Ashling Murphy's fingernails, which matched that of the accused man, with a 1 in 14,000 chance of it being someone else. The jurors were also told there were cuts on every exposed part of his body, which was important as there had been dense undergrowth at the scene. Now, we also heard about the night following Ashling Murphy's death. We heard that the accused man left Tullamore that night, with the prosecution saying he fled Tullamore, that he arrived at the home of his parents who live in Crumlin in Dublin in the early hours of January the 13th. Now, the prosecution say it will be alleged that when he went into his parents' house, he had a beard and walked naturally, and it would then be alleged that he would be seen 12 hours later leaving his parents' home clean-shaven, and it appeared he'd suffered an injury. Now, he was taken to St James's Hospital, where he said he'd been stabbed in Blanchardstown in Dublin, and there had been a stabbing that night. So Gardai from Tullamore were then called in when it was discovered Mr. Puska had travelled from Tullamore the previous day, and they spoke to him. And on the 14th of January, which is now 2 days after Ashling Murphy had died, Gardai said to him, "We're investigating her murder." And he replied via an interpreter who they'd gotten on the phone, "I did it, I murdered, I am the murderer." He later said he didn't mean to do it intentionally. He felt guilty, was sorry, and he referred to having 5 children. He later told another Garda, "I'm sorry, I see girl I never see before. I have knife I use for chain. When she passed, I cut her neck, she panic, I panic, will I go for 10 years? And he then pointed at his abdomen and said, "I do this." And the prosecuting barrister, Anne Marie Lawlor, said the circumstances of Miss Murphy's death were not known at that time. Then when Mr. Puska was formally interviewed by Gardai after his release from hospital and shown a picture of Ashling Murphy, he said he'd never seen her before. So it's the prosecution and the state's case that the accused man, Jozef Puska, made up a pack of lies about the stabbing in Blanchardstown. The prosecution say he admitted to the murder and confessed to it at a level of detail which only that person would know what had happened. So a lot in that opening argument.
And there were also some maps and photographic evidence was produced in court yesterday afternoon.
Yeah, we heard from our first witnesses yesterday afternoon, and the first witness was Liam Farrell. Now, he's a cartographer and he travelled to the scene on the day of the alleged murder, and he provided the jury with 7 maps, and these were outlining the scene in Tullamore, the areas involved in Offaly, Mucklagh and in Dublin, and the CCTV involved. And in fact, in total, 25,000 hours of CCTV was harnessed. So he had a roadmap of where all the cameras were. Now, the court heard it was a challenge to plot the map of the scene of where Ashling Murphy died because of the overgrowth and briars there. And Liam Farrell described how a bike was found at the scene and it appeared to have been kind of thrown on top of these briars. And he said other items found included sunglasses, a hat and runners. And then we heard from our second witness, which was Detective Caroline Hughes. She took photos on the day of the incident. Now, she described coming at the scene at 7 p.m. that night, and she said because it was dark, they had industrial lighting to aid them. She said a crime scene had been erected and there was the body of a female in the tent. And the jury were given a booklet with 9 photos in it. And in these photos were a picture of a bike, a picture of a pink woolly hat with a bauble on it, blue Nike runners, and there was also a picture of a blood-stained stick. So it was a lengthy day of evidence yesterday, and the trial is due to resume in Court 13 at 11 this morning.